Spring is only just around the corner. I have vegetables that are now beginning to sprout again. There's also much on some of the plants to harvest. But I have plots that urgently need preparing to receive the new plantings that will go in about a month's time. What am I going to do? So the question is, what are we going to do? I know 4 weeks seems a long way off, but actually, in reality, it's not. So in today's video, we're going to give you a few hacks, a few tips on some of the things you can be doing so that you can get onto your plots and get them ready for the spring plantings. One of the first things that will go into our plots round about mid-March will be our onions. They're going to be going here. There's another bed in this plot where they'll be going, and they'll also be going into one of the beds in plot 1. So this needs to have its annual dressing. The kale hasn't really done as well as it has in other years. I think I may have put it in a little bit too late this year, but we have had some really nice harvests from it, and it's still been producing its lovely leaves. You can see that it still is. So I'm actually going to leave that in situ right up until the moment that I want to plant our onions out, because we can continue having harvest from that, and I can work around that. But what I do want to do today is to harvest the remaining sprouts so that I can twist those out and we can get a nice layer of our compost on top. And we've also left ourselves, Mrs. W, the tops to these.
Yes, we have, yes.
I think that will be our vegetable for today.
Lovely.
Now you can see here, this parsnip is starting to try and regrow. It's important that you actually have these up and out as soon as you start to see that, because what the new growth is going to do is to take all the energy from the root that you want to be able to eat. It will also turn it very woody. You'll get a very woody core down the middle. So, us being new dig, I'm just going to loosen the soil to start with. I think there might be 2 in here, Mrs. W.
Could be. Is there? Oh yeah, there is. Oh, that one forked a bit.
So that's that. There's another one just on this side.
Yeah, I think that's all. We've more or less eaten them all, so we've done well at harvesting those this year.
That we have. Can I get it out, Mrs. W?
Oh, that's a nice size one, isn't it? Lovely.
Now, if anybody thinks that you can't grow carrots or parsnips in no-dig soil, because you will be told if you're not no-dig, you need to dig it to aerate it so that these roots can get down. Well, there's proof. You don't need to. You can grow perfectly good parsnips in no-dig soil. So, we've got the remaining parsnips out. As I said earlier, we're just going to leave the kale in until the time comes when we want to transplant the onion seedlings into here. So next, I need to give it its annual covering of compost. Before I do that, I want you to take a good look. Just see how many weeds there are actually in this plot. If you go back and look at our videos from 2024, where the sprouts and the kale were, the broad beans were. We twisted those out and then planted these brassicas. We've done nothing else to it other than pull the odd weed as and when we see it. So although no dig doesn't mean you're not going to get any weeds, but it does mean you will get an awful lot less. Before I put the compost on, I'm just going to pull any bits of grass and weeds that I can see. There's a piece of that oxalis, Mrs. W, that Susie has got very, very little.
We sometimes get a little bit on the edges, don't we, from close to the grass.
Yeah, that's where there's the least amount of compost, really, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Where it slopes down.
Yeah, it's looking good at the moment.
Yeah. So that's all the prep that I need to do as far as weeding goes. And this really is where no dig is so good, because it takes you very little time at all. If you weren't no dig and you're a digger and you're watching this, you're going to have the task of now single digging or double digging, depending on where you are on your cycle, this all over, and adding the compost. Once the weeds are removed, there's another one there, Mrs. W, just have that. All we need to do now is just roughly, and I mean very roughly, just level it out so that there aren't no particular hollows. And you see all this white stuff here, Mrs. W, all the mycelium.
Let me see if I can get that on.
That's what no dig promotes. It's what helps your plants grow really well, and especially in times of drought or when there's heavy rain and the plants are under stress and they can't get the things that they need. They have a relationship with your plants, and they'll send food to your plants and the nutrients that they need to help them keep growing. So we'll just tip some compost onto the bed, and I'm aiming for about an inch, inch and a half, certainly no more than 2 inches of a compost layer on our beds. And as I always say, don't be too concerned if your compost has lumps, because after all, it is only mid-February. Must be Sasha's birthday tomorrow, Mrs. W.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it is. 22, how about that?
Yeah, 22.
The baby is 22.
Where does the time go, Mrs. W?
I don't know.
Where does the time go?
I know I'm feeling old.
So yeah, we're only at the midway point in February. There'll still be lots of frosty weather to come. Lots of rain, lots of cold winds. And that will help to break down any lumps you have in your compost. But in all honesty, even if, like this, I would plant straight into this if it was the right time of year and I had the plants. The only time that I don't like lumps is when we come to grow carrots or parsnips, because they are the only seeds that myself and Mrs. W actually direct sow into the soil. So I reserve our best and most finest compost that we've made for the year just for those two beds, so that the little seedlings, not so much the parsnip, but certainly the carrots, they're really, really tiny seeds. And a big lump of compost could stop it from germinating. The next thing I'm going to do is to take the remaining swede. And that's for the same reason as we did with the parsnips. They're going to start growing again. In fact, I can see some fresh leaves coming now. So some nice swede there, Mrs. W.
Yeah, they're not massive, but they taste delicious.
Oh yes.
We have had some bigger ones. Those are sort of the smaller ones that have got left in, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not ever really going to get any bigger now.
No.
Sort of come to the end of their time. We grew two varieties this year, which was Helena and Tweed. These are the Helena that have been picking here up to the middle here. Swede didn't do as well this year, did they?
No, they didn't. Don't know why, because we've grown those before and they've been very successful. So
Yeah, in other
probably
years.
just weather conditions, I imagine.
In other years they have been really good. But you can see that one never really got going and
No.
swelled out. It's just remained a long root.
Neither was that other one, really, but
No. But you'll get some food off that, won't
I'm
you, Mrs.
sure.
W?
I'm sure.
It certainly will not go to waste. And then you can see I already made a started on this plot. This is plot 1. And I've got brassicas, early brassicas and onions going in here. So that's why I've started to do this. Carrots are another crop that will start to regrow as we get to the back end of February and into March. And the reason all these root crops are actually starting to regrow is because they're biannuals. So the piece we want to eat, we get in its first season. In the second season, it will use, for the plant's sake, it uses all the energies from that root that we actually want to eat to actually make a flower stalk and set its seed. So let's have these carrots out of here, Mrs. W.
Yeah.
Look at that, lovely and clean. Really is a lovely variety, the Eskimo is.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Good winter cabbage. Carrot even. What I shall do with these is take them indoors and give them a bit of a wash and leave them just to dry back off. And then I'm going to put them into plastic bags and put them into the bottom of my fridge. And I've found that they keep really well like that. Instead of, if you leave them out of the fridge and that, sometimes they can go a bit soft. Keep them in the plastic well wrapped up and they keep very well.
Oh yes. It won't be long now before we actually sow the next lot of carrots that will be ready for us in June.
No, that's another reason to get these out so we can top this bed up, can't we? And
Yes.
get that prepped ready, because we've been so successful growing the carrots in here. We're going to always grow them in here, I think, really, is our thought, our train of thought at the moment, anyway. Certainly for this year.
Yeah, the carrots will go back in here this year, Mrs. W, for the summer. And we'll grow something else over the autumn-winter period. And actually one of the new raised beds that we made from the pallet collars that you saw in our last video. We shall put the winter carrots into one of those. I'm going to try something a little bit different with the carrots this year as well, in the way that I sow them, because actually the more carrots I can get like that, the better I like it. So we have our bed preparation underway where we've needed to, and we certainly shan't be behind. Mrs. W is actually going to blanch the sprouts and freeze them so that we can still enjoy the taste of those sprouts over the coming months. Something quite nice when you've done that. Sometime in June you can be eating some sprouts.
Yeah.
When everybody else is waiting for them to come back into season. And sprouts are actually one of those things that really do blanch and freeze very well. And as Mrs. W said, she's actually going to wash those carrots and pop them into a bag and keep them in the fridge. And we read somewhere that they can keep for quite a while, so it's a bit of an experiment for us, but nevertheless we're going to try it. And of course we've still got those carrots that have germinated and are growing away in the polytunnel, and that means that will bridge the gap between when these finish and when the ones that we sow towards the end of March become ready themselves. They will just bridge that gap. They're on the way, so the weather is starting to warm up and the day length is lengthening. Should achieve a harvest from those sometime in April. Not only do we show you how we grow, i.e. being no-dig and the things that we do, and how to grow vegetables, but we also, on our channel, we feature Mrs. W, where she'll do a recipe of some kind with the vegetables that we grow, and also how to preserve things. They tend to come a little later on in the year, once we have things in the garden that actually do need to be preserved. So if you like things like that, as well as growing your own fruit and veg, then do make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. If you've been watching us and you think no-dig might be your thing, and you want to know how to make a no-dig bed or how to make a no-dig raised bed, then watch this video next. Have a great rest of your gardening week, and myself and Mrs. W, we shall see you very soon.